Cool. So this is my presentation. The event's called, as you can see, we're calling it Rock All Night. Obviously, I'm the planner. We've got kind of a table of contents set up, kind of thing. This is like you can see, we've got all the objectives here. I've got the venue set up. We've got some smart objectives. One of the things I only note I'm going to add to this slide is that 3-4 smart objectives in and of itself for the scope of this statement, because it is a 24-hour rock festival, is going to be pretty significant as far as like all the other things that have to get done. There's so many security related things. There's so many facts that I've got, upwards of 10 headliner bands and maybe 30 other bands showing up. So this in and of itself, just these few smart objectives right here aren't going to encompass the whole entire project, but this is just for the sake of the project. Also, if anybody has any questions throughout this, let me know. Let's see, to add to that, we've got our stakeholder identification. As you can see, normal, same old, event host, marketing team, so on and so forth for that. The only thing I'm kind of adding to that is some of these sponsors. The more research I did, literally last night, I was, doing insomnia. So I was doing some research and I was thinking that there's certain sponsors that might fit in my category a little bit better. This is the one I submitted, but there's a company called Live Nation that has a huge aspect of in special events, especially live concerts and everything like that, who would actually be really willing to partner with me on this type of thing. So I'd probably add a couple of my sponsors and maybe move one of them towards my marketing team kind of thing. But apart from that, these are my stakeholder identifications there. Obviously stakeholder analysis, my sponsors, high importance, lower interest specifically. They're more interested in getting their name out there. Obviously the event host and the headliners, the people who are most interested, the performers and then less known performers, so on and so forth. City and County Denver obviously is going to be big, important because it is at the Pepsi Center. It's going to be noisy, so they're probably going to care a lot about that aspect. This is my work breakdown structure, 1 of 5, obviously. We've got kind of once again, this is set up as, this is my small portions of the jobs that are going to be done. Every single one of these bullets probably has about 3,000 other things that needs to get done for an event like this. My team's probably going to be in the dozens to get everything done in this type of thing. I've worked on some events on a way lower level about this, so it's just kind of very basic level of what I need to get done here. So, the talent job, creating the band list and sending invitation to bands, there's probably 35 other tasks associated with those things in addition to what I've written down here. Obviously some of the vendors, which includes my food trucks, and making sure if you've ever been to a festival, you want to make sure that there's some sort of people selling merchandise to keep people entertained. There's people, those type of sponsors can help pay for the event and then also get more people to enjoy it. Obviously food vendors and making sure there's alcohol access and water and all those things are kind of being included in this slide here. Obviously venue setup. The one thing that was interesting about that is the Pepsi Center doesn't, I was having trouble figuring out specifically what they would do as far as security goes. I know that they have some stuff, but I don't know how often they take over the whole entire parking lot. So I might end up having a separate security for certain portions of the event, or making them integrate, or maybe hiring some more staff to supplement the current security team for the Pepsi Center. The website's pretty self-explanatory. Once again, there would probably be about 7 or 8 other tasks minimum added to this. Obviously choosing the web developer in and of itself is going to be a huge process. And if I was doing my event next year, I'd probably want to already have that person figured out and already set up a month ago if I was doing it in 2021. So that's part of it, I guess. Obviously the marketing, I've gotten a lot more bullets attached to this. One of the things that I kind of added to this event that I thought was kind of interesting is I decided I was going to specifically hire social media influencers and give them exclusive access to backstage at things, and work with them significantly ahead of the event to get them to on Instagram and Facebook and all those aspects to kind of add to the whole process kind of thing. This is my Gantt chart. Obviously, it's a pain in the butt to look at. You can zoom in. I do have a file of this. This is just the same stuff as my work breakdown structure. Any questions, always interrupt if you want to. My vendor selections here. My AV company is the one highlighted, the venue, AV ticketing, web developing, and security, so on and so forth. Those are all highlighted in red here. My web developer is actually, the company is owned by someone I actually know, so I would have an in there, that aspect. I also know they can handle that particular thing. The AV company was the hardest for me to decide on because it was also, I never actually got a hold of anybody from Pepsi Center. So I don't know how much in-house they have, but JSAV seemed like a good option for my particular event. They seem to do stuff along those lines. Obviously, I decided to use Pepsi Center for the venue. Security, Argus Events. I believe that's what I said. It's blocked off by the thing. Let me see. Oh yeah, Argus Events. But that was they're the main guys for security, event security in Denver. So it just make perfect sense how to use them. Preliminary budget set up kind of here. Once again, I have this feeling that all these numbers are way too small. But that's really, it'll have to do with how we start running the numbers when we get estimates from vendors and venue space and all that stuff. But like even that estimated, $130,000 budget, which is just like all the numbers added up, might even be way more than that, considering like venue rental, $10,000, that might even be like a tenth of what the actual venue space might require. But once again, I'm not 100% sure on those exact numbers, but that's kind of the budget. Risk management plan, as maybe you guys saw the discussion boards, there's, these possible risk factors, obviously people jumping fences or, safety of, a lot of my artists are international. So they're going to, there's certain things I have to deal with that. And then the objective is the people who come to the event are the people who are most excited to see these artists. So there's the more chance of people, being crazy stalkers or things like that. So I'm putting that type of problems into my layout and making sure those are already, like, those type of risks are already mitigated before we even get to that point, or reduced at least. So yeah, that's all kind of self-explanatory. The progress report we made is kind of like, I decided reporting to Live Nation because they kind of turned into my, main sponsor. Project highlights a month before, obviously, it was a big deal that we got the Pepsi Center. It was a big deal that all my headliners were available. And then it's really a big deal that the marketing is going the way it needs to be going. One of the three main problems I decided to run into was some of my bands use pyrotechnics in their stage shows. And then my idea was, maybe someone that were like, oh yeah, we just bought the biggest flamethrower in the history of the universe. We really want to use it for your show. So we decided to add that, that flamethrower aspect. Okay, so we have to talk to the fire marshal and talk to the venue and be like, well, what do we need to do to keep this people safe? Do we have to set up the stage so everyone has to be 30 feet away while this band is playing? Otherwise, they're going to catch on fire. So that was just kind of a big part of that. Sorry about that. Obviously, I also thought that a possible problem might be like an international tragedy, like a shooting at like another venue or another concert or whatever, that we would have to deal with in our marketing and maybe change our security plans, something unforeseen. I didn't really specifically decide what that tragedy would be, but there's always, in this day and age, there seems to be something new happening at big, huge events like this on a regular basis. Like sometimes it's the shootings, sometimes, a bomb went off an Ariana Grande concert, things like that. So we just kind of want to have a plan to deal with that. Obviously, there's always a chance of AV needs going or something else going over budget. So we figure out how we're going to do with that. Obviously, the rest of this is kind of self-explanatory. You can read that on your own if you need to. Post-event evaluation. That link is active in my PowerPoint. So that's always good. I will show a screenshot of it in a second. Those are kind of 3 SMART objectives that I had the evaluation questions on. Once again, there's a chance the scope of the project will be bigger than that. That's kind of my post-event evaluation. It's cool that it kind of, I haven't tried the link, but do you guys know if it records or not, or if it will like read the text for you, which would be kind of cool if it did. I feel like it probably does. But yeah, that's kind of that, how satisfied were you with the quality of the acts and so on and so forth. These are my strengths as a leader. The left side here is some of the things about the campaigner personality in and of itself from the 16 personality types. Obviously, some weaknesses there. These are kind of how it applied to my leadership style and how it applies to what's important with just what we talked about in class about what different types of things a good leader needs and like what I need to deal with as a campaigner, and then what are good about my personality type as a campaigner. Thank you guys for listening to my presentation.
Good. Anyone has any question?
Yeah. Did you have a scope statement slide? Maybe I just missed it. I just didn't see it.
Yeah, it was the first one.
Oh, okay.
It was the second one actually, technically, because I had no, it was technically the third one, but yeah, it was there. I had it. I just didn't read them out loud.
Oh, okay.
Because for constraints of time and everything.
Cool. Thank you.
Right.
Yeah.
But just the first one, I mean, the first thing, and then it's not only apply to Daniel only. So just everyone, when you start to present, just to briefly talk about your event. It's the day and then the what type. Yes, just briefly. So right now, Daniel, can you just talk about your event like a 20 seconds or less than 30 seconds, because we have a few students just showing up after you started, after your presentation. So I just want to make sure everybody can explain your event within 30 seconds, like the elevator speech. So can you just talk about 30 seconds?
Yeah, sounds perfect. Okay, so my event is called Rock All Night. It's gonna be summertime in 2021. It's at the Pepsi Center in Denver, obviously, and the parking lot. The idea of the event is it's a 24-hour rock and roll heavy metal festival, very specifically based on European industrial metal bands. Obviously, I'm making up the idea that a lot of people are going to want to come to it, but the idea behind it is I'm going to have headliners who have really big shows like pyrotechnics and big stages and huge stage shows and everything like that. And then during the day, and then those bands aren't playing because they have like 6-hour setups to do their space, then other bands will be able to play in the parking lot. So then it'll be like a music festival with all the different types of things that entails, like vendors and like bars and like maybe not bars, but like alcohol access and drinks and contests and all that stuff. Questions, comments, concerns?
My event is a campaign celebration dinner. It's an event that we have done at the Michigan State University. A campaign for a university runs about 8 years. There's a few years in the silent phase and then the active phase when we're fundraising. And then at the end is when we reach our goal. So at Michigan State, this goal was $1.4 billion. And we wanted to celebrate all of the major donors that had contributed to the success of the campaign. In fundraising at major universities and other nonprofit organizations, they allocate about 3% of the fundraising toward putting on entertainment or events or things like that. So you've got quite a healthy budget. My table of contents just shows what each slide will represent. My objectives for this event were to execute a spectacular event to thank the donors and increase emotional investment into the university. We were hoping for about 700 people to attend out of 1,400 invitees, with a budget of about $250,000. We could exceed that if necessary. And you can see a picture here of what the event actually looked like. It was in a clear-sided, clear-roof tent outdoors in the main part of the campus so that we could see many of the buildings that benefited from the fundraising. My internal stakeholders were the president of the university, the board of trustees, my direct managers that we reported to, and key donors of the campaign. The external stakeholders were the donor attendees, vendors, musicians, etc. Here you can see my stakeholder analysis, high to low. It was important to keep the university president and the board of trustees satisfied that the event was a success. It's an example of the type of tent that was used. They can be pretty expensive, but it really was necessary to the success of the overall ambiance of the event. We've got my different vendors and areas that I focused on, spending a little bit more money on the quality of the invitations that were sent. You're dealing with a clientele that is used to very, very high-end items. So you don't cut corners when it comes to invitations or decor. This is my Gantt chart. I won't focus a lot on it, but it just lays out the different time frame. It's quite small and condensed because this type of an event usually takes about 8 months to a year to plan before it actually takes place. The vendors I selected, if it were going to be here in Denver at Metro State University, would be Benson Tent Rental, because they had the best selection and the longest history of being in business in the area, and they could handle this type of an event. Integrity Print Group, Footers Catering, Spectrum AV, and National Entertainment Agency, because for this type of an event, we want a really high-end entertainer. Somebody like Martha from Martha and the Vandellas, a group that was popular back in the 60s, because of the donor base that's coming to this type of event are an older crowd. My budget, I tried to keep it around $200,000. I do anticipate running over in a lot of areas. The tent rental at $15,000 probably was going to cost closer to $20,000 for this kind of a tent. They're not easy to come by. A lot of companies don't have them. So sometimes you have to go outside the market. For example, here in Denver, you might have to go all the way to Los Angeles to rent a tent of this type to be the quality that you need. Food is a big part of the budget, food and beverage. You don't want to cut corners on this. For example, I would never serve chicken. It would always be a high-end like filet mignon or a high-end fish item like sea bass, those types of things. Again, like I said, the invitations are another high budget item, and the entertainment is a high budget. The band, when I say band, that includes like some high known entertainer like Martha from Martha and the Vandellas, at the minimum $20,000. My risk potentials would be weather, because this is outside in the center of campus, and we're prone to hail. My event is in June. So hail could damage the tent or injure guests on their way in. It could also be dangerous or unpleasant for the guests traveling from the parking structure into the tent. So I would need to secure a rain backup location and identify insurance coverage to be adequate to cover this type of thing. In order to reduce the risks, I would check weather the day before. Always have a backup plan, which might mean having to set up the alternate location to a certain extent when I got closer to the event if the weather looked iffy. the tent would be in place for several days. So the location would prevent students from using that area. Student protesters could disrupt the particular event because they don't fully understand the necessity of doing an event like this, or the importance of the donors donating to the university and what benefits that would be to them. To avoid that, I would communicate through the student email and post flyers about the importance of the event and what the impact of the donations would be. I'd describe the length of time that the area would be unavailable. I would also cordon off a perimeter of the tent to allow a secure buffer, and hire additional security. So that security could be as minimal as student security employees hired through the campus police department that would stand guard day and night to make sure there was no damage done to the tent in the area, and also just to simply keep curious spectators away that wanted to peek in and see what was going on. Another risk factor would be my keynote speaker. Celebrity speaker at events like this are usually a major donor to the university. Sometimes they live far away, like they might live in Australia or Japan. So a risk could be that their flight could be delayed for up to 3 hours, or they could become ill or unable to attend at the last minute. So I would have to create alternate versions of the agenda that would allow a substitute keynote speaker to come in, or allow the agenda to be shifted in such a way that if the person was going to be delayed, originally if they were scheduled to speak at the beginning of the event, maybe I would have to slide them in toward the end of the event and move other people up. Here's my project progress report that would have been done about a month before the event. One of the problems and issues is, excuse me, that the tent that I previously contracted suddenly a month out became unavailable. The tent portion was canceled with the local vendor because he did not set up enough advance notice, and so I had to renegotiate the contract with this vendor to go to another major market area to rent a new tent that was still a clear-sided tent, and the vendor and I would split the cost, or pay a minimal surcharge to get a replacement tent. Perhaps a VIP guest required handicap accessible hotel room. I would have to make sure that the Four Seasons had a suite that was accessible and that it was adequate to suffice the needs. In my past experience, one major donor was very involved with the Persons with Disability Act in Washington, D.C. She traveled in a very large motorized wheelchair. She was extremely attentive whenever she entered an event as to whether she could be accommodated, and was being accommodated in the manner that she deserved. So for something like this, I would personally go to the Four Seasons. I would look at the hotel room. The hotel might believe that it was adequate enough for handicap accessibility, but perhaps housekeeping had moved a couch or a chair in the path that this person needed to traverse with their wheelchair. I would have to make sure that things like that were handled to perfection. Another problem might happen where I originally selected filet mignon and swordfish, and suddenly swordfish was not available in the market. I would then confirm with the caterer that something like sea bass would be an adequate substitute on the menu. My leadership style is a protagonist. This slide describes my characteristics, my strengths and my weaknesses. A trait that is common in this particular leadership style is one to wanting to fix everything. And that is something that I have found in my life, both professionally and personally. I want to fix things. If I see something go wrong, whether it's with a family member or with one of my fellow students, I want to jump in and give advice and help fix the problem situation. My event objectives are to execute a successful event to thank the donors. So one of my questions is, did the program speakers inspire you to increase your donations next year? And if we click here, we can hopefully see my event survey. Well, so are you able to see this on screen?
No.
Can't see your survey.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, if you go in my presentation and click it, you will be able to go through the survey. I use what's it called, Qualtrics?
Yep.
I found that very easy to use, and I really liked it. Something I had not used in the past. So that's my presentation. Does anybody have any questions?
So, the name of my event is Miracles in Motion. It is a Stable Strides benefit dinner. And just a little background on Stable Strides. Stable Strides is a therapeutic horse riding academy that provides just physical therapy and mental therapy and different types of therapy for individuals. So here's just the table of contents really quick. So the event venue that I chose is Latigo Trails Equestrian Center, which is actually located like right across the parking lot from one of their barns or one of their stables that they have. The purpose of my event is raising funds for Stable Strides to improve their programs of therapeutic riding, mental health services, and hippotherapy. We are also looking for new sponsors for several of our therapy horses, and all extra proceeds are going to go towards buying new tack for all the horses. So a little bit of my SMART objectives and event details. I'm trying to get sponsorships for 5 of my therapy horses through the course of the event, get 10 volunteers to help the day of the event, and to have at least 80% attendees who fill out the survey to be extremely likely to recommend our services to a friend. So we're really trying to get information about us out there through this event as well. Our assumptions is that a live band is going to play that night. We will obtain sponsors to provide the silent auction items that's going to happen throughout the event, and we will get a sponsorship for the 5 therapy horses as well. Some of my constraints is that since this is a benefit dinner, there is going to be a little bit of a limited budget, so it will only allow for a certain amount of entertainment, and we're also hoping to get sponsorships for a good portion of our needs throughout the event. So definitely we'll have some constraints in that area. We can only send invitations and market to a small community. We do have lots of connections with healthcare facilities, and other places that actually refer us to their customers. But at the same time, we still have just a small community that we serve within the Latigo Trails area. So we must only market to them. And we also must fully rely on volunteers because this is a volunteer operation that will have to rely on our volunteers to make this event happen. So identifying some of my stakeholders, the internal stakeholders will obviously be the Stable Strides executive directors and employees, the Latigo Trails Event Center, and my project team. And the external stakeholders will be the volunteers, event attendees, the grill at Latigo, which is the caterer, Grass It Up, which is the bluegrass band that will be playing that night, and all of the sponsors. So the most important high-stake, high-power stakeholders are going to be the Stable Strides like director, the employees, and of course my project team, because we're going to have the highest stake in this project. So the WBS breakdown, I actually broke down into 6 different categories. You can go through them. So I started with marketing. That's obvious with the invitation, emails, adding the benefit dinner to social media, keeping track of RSVPs, and then obviously at the end of the event, this is kind of like the wrap up of the marketing would be creating a post-event evaluations. And then the venue is obviously important, finding and securing the venue, which is pretty self-explanatory right there. Food and beverage, obviously listing possible caterers, securing the caterers, planning menus, and planning the drinks as well. Live music, figuring out what band we're going to use, and then able to securing that band as well. And obviously sponsors and volunteers, listing potential sponsors, securing donations, and then listing potential volunteers that will help as well throughout the event. And then the decorations, determining the decoration needs, actually getting the decorations, and then creating a setup and takedown plan. So I did do my Gantt chart. This is a link here, but I did break it down a little bit, and hopefully you guys can see it. I tried to make it as visible as possible in these screens. So obviously this is breaking down everything that I just went over in my earlier, the WBS sheet. So this is just obviously the marketing is going to be kind of the initial start of the start of the project, as well as securing the venue, because those are one of the two most important tasks, following with trying to figure out food and beverage and the band, and that's going to be kind of the secondary tasks, and then ending with sponsors and volunteers and figuring that out. And then, of course, decorations is kind of like the last thing, because it's not as important as everything else. So I kind of put this at the end, just as we're getting closer to the event, let's get decoration figured out, because we have our venue, we figured out what we're doing. Now for decor. So my vendor selection. So I chose Latigo Event Center, and the reason I chose that is that they have worked alongside Stable Strides, and they are actually one of the locations, because Stable Strides has 2 locations, one in Penrose, the Penrose Community Center, and one at the Latigo Trails area. And they actually have sponsored them in the past, and the barn that they used is actually sponsored for them next to the Latigo Event Center. So they've always worked together. So I thought it'd be good if they could continue that relationship and they would sponsor the venue for us. The live music that I chose was Grass It Up. They are a bluegrass band that formed in Colorado, and they have a very upbeat sound. So I thought they would be perfect for dancing, because that is the hope, is that throughout the night there'd be some dancing. And then food and beverages, I chose the Grill at Latigo, and the reason I chose this is it's actually attached to the event center, so it would just be very convenient to help out with the food as if it was right there. So yes, they're attached to the event center. And actually the Grill at Latigo, if you go upstairs to their dining area, you can actually like look down out over the event center, which is kind of cool. Photography I chose is Kendall Lacombe Photography. She's actually an old family friend of ours, and I've known her most of my life, so she does really good photography, and she would offer a discounted rate for this event, which is why we chose her. And then invitations just through Paper Source. It's a printing company that offers unique designs and also allows for printing in bulk, so there's a good price for that, which is why we chose Paper Source. And my budget plan, I'm not going to go into every single detail on this because there's a lot, but just like the basic budget here: proceeds, sales, sponsorships, and donations. I have all my expenses listed here. And then, of course, marketing, program, miscellaneous, because I'm trying to do at the end of my event, just to explain that miscellaneous is giving little gift bags at the end, just to kind of thank them for coming to the event. And then obviously set up, clean up. So my risk management plan, obviously focusing on the 3 major factors of health, weather, and venue protection. Obviously, I don't want any health risks, and this Latigo Trails Event Center is actually about 10 minutes out of a small town, so it's kind of in the middle of nowhere. So I want to reduce any health emergencies by training my staff in order to make sure that they know what to do in case of emergency situations, so we're not waiting for emergency vehicles to show up. And then obviously have different things to avoid inclement weather. It is a dirt parking lot, so we have to make sure that if there's rain that we have an optional parking lot for them to park in, so it's not all muddy. And then obviously we need to protect the venue and property, so getting insurance for property damage and making sure that only trained personnel are using the equipment for what it's supposed to be used for. And then I have my progress report. Obviously the highlights is receiving the needs for the silent auction. We got the band, and we exceeded the number of participants by 20%. By that point, problems is not getting responses from volunteers, so sending follow-up requests to volunteers and expanding our search in order to make sure we get the people we need. The current budget cost, we went over on decorations, so maybe just finding a way to still have the elegance that we're wanting, but maybe minimize what we're doing just to, make sure we fit into budget. And then venue has updated the policy that they're no longer allowing alcohol in their event center. So I have to update our drink menu in order to reflect the non-alcoholic options. And then just some updates as we change the host speaker for the event. And things that need to be confirmed is obviously the drink menu, like I just mentioned, and the sponsors are asking that their logos be presented on a banner at the event. So we need to kind of discuss where that can go. And just the risk management status. Our staff is getting trained right now. Most of them are trained, but anyone who isn't, we're getting them certified this next little bit. And we're also in the process of getting insurance for property and equipment damages. And plans for next performance period is finalizing volunteer lists, establishing tasks for the day of the event. So what are the volunteers' roles, going over and confirming drink, food menus, and then establishing a setup breakdown procedures for the day of the event. So now switching to my leadership style, I got mediator. And I think one of the biggest things about this characteristic is that they like to make people happy, and they want people to be happy. And so that can be seen as like a strength and a weakness, because obviously I'm very flexible in wanting to make sure that everybody is getting what they want, but at the same time I can kind of get carried away with that and want so badly to people to like it that I take it too personally. So just finding a good balance is probably the biggest thing with this characteristic here. The last thing I had, I probably should have flipped this, but the evaluation plan for the event is to get sponsorship. Obviously, these are my SMART objectives of getting the sponsorship, getting volunteers, and having my survey be filled out. And I do have a survey attached. I can open it if you'd like. I don't know if we need to go into that or not, of the actual evaluation plan.
Can you? Yeah.
I can try to open it.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to have to.
Well, actually, the first objective and second objective, you can just count the number of sponsorship and then volunteers. So, well, actually, you can just count the number of the sponsorship and the volunteer. So that is it. So,
yeah.
Okay, and then also third one is rigorously you need evaluation.
And let's see, there's my coming up. I tried to share my screen. I don't know if it's working or not for my evaluation.
Yeah,
there you go. So just like, how was your experience? How did you hear about us? Just to know how we're advertising. Would you be interested in volunteering? Would you consider sponsoring one or more of our therapy horses? And then how likely would you be to recommend us to a friend or family member?
Yeah.
And that's about all I have for that.
It's good.
Okay, can everybody see? So it's Taggart's Wedding, Taggart. This is my table of contents. I'm going to try to go through pretty fast because you guys already saw most of my project. I did the midterm. It's a wedding. It's going to be held July 25th, 2020 from 4 p.m. to 10 p.m. on Whidbey Island, which is 2.5 hours north of SeaTac Airport. SMART objectives, so food and beverage, venue, decor, all under $20,000. I want to send my 50 invitations out with 90% RSVP, which is 45 guests by June 1st, and 95% guest attendance on the day of event. I'm going to have games and a photo booth for togetherness and for 100% guest satisfaction. So the constraints, it rains a lot in Washington. On that day, there's a 9% chance of rainfall. And then a budget increase due to family and friend travels, or if people end up wanting to come that weren't initially invited. I would move my event inside if it did rain. So my stakeholders, obviously internal is going to be bride, groom, the planner and immediate family. And then external is going to be the officiant, guests, vendors, food and beverage, and all those. So high influence and interest is going to be the bride and groom. It's going to be the highest. And then the immediate family, obviously we have to make sure that they're happy. And then everybody else, the guests and the officiant and everything is going to be low stake, low influence. This is my work breakdown structure. I just have the venue, food and beverage, invitations, bride, groom, the vendors, the entertainment, and decor. The vendor selection, so venue, it's going to be on Whidbey Island on the beach. It's like a really big Airbnb that can fit everybody that's invited who choose to stay. For the food, I had to make sure that it was fresh seafood since it's in Washington State and everybody loves the fresh seafood. So the catering is going to be done by the Serendipity LLC. They had the best looking food. You can't really read this, but it's the same. The venue, the food and beverage, invitations, vendors, and bride and groom. Just make sure everything's done in a timely manner. For the budget, I came in under budget until I had people who wanted to come to the wedding last minute. So I had to find some place for them to stay, so a hotel close by, because the Airbnb was already full. So that increased my budget a little bit. This is my risk management. So obviously the rain, they have earthquakes up there. So I have to make sure that everyone's aware of how to take cover and for safety reasons and everything like that. For the travel, I'm going to have these vans transport everybody from the airport and hope that everybody can get flying at the same time so they can make one trip. But if somebody's canceled or delayed, then obviously we'll have to find different transportation means for them. And then food allergies. Maybe somebody's not aware they have a food allergy, or they didn't share with me initially that they'd had a food allergy with the RSVP. The project progress report, I split it up into two. This is where I said that the 4 old friends wanted to come to the wedding, so I had to find a place for them to stay. Closing evaluation. This is a picture of it, the screenshot in the back. Would you like me to click on it and share it as well, or? I just basically had everybody rate the food, the decor, the venue, their overall experience. And then for the closing evaluation, I was an assertive logistician. So basically I have to work on my patients as a planner, that not everybody works at the same pace or anything like that. So I really have to work on that. My strengths are honesty, strong-willed, responsible. So as a planner, I have to make sure that I just know who I'm working with, you know, what they're capable of and everything like that. And that's it.
Yeah, thank you. Any question? Do you have any question?
Yeah, Marquetta, if this were this July, what would you do under the COVID situation?
I mean, hopefully Seattle is open at that point. I know Seattle was hit pretty hard. So I'm just hoping that they reopen. And then if not, I mean, if people don't want to come, like, we're going to be in a house together. And, you know, I would fully understand if somebody wasn't able to make it or they didn't feel comfortable. But we wouldn't be leaving and going out or doing anything like that. We would just stay in the house. So I'm hoping that people would still come.
Great. Good job.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the event is called Homeward Bound. It is a fundraiser benefit for the Longmont Humane Society. The purpose of the event is to raise the operational funds for the Humane Society over the next year. So a quick table of contents. So the event will be held at the Boulder County Fairgrounds Exhibition Building. It is the largest building to host this event in Longmont. We do anticipate a guest count of around 450 people, and then volunteers, vendors. The event is to take place on March 5th, of 2021. And once again, it is to support the operating costs of the Longmont Humane Society through 2022. We are hoping to raise at least $650,000 for this event.
at a minimum. This is a real event and was actually supposed to happen March of this year, but obviously it was canceled due to coronavirus. So it's a really important event for the Humane Society. It obviously will benefit feeding animals, housing animals, staff payments, keeping the building open. And one of our goals is to limit the budget to under $10,000. And by doing that, getting as many donations as we possibly can. Our constraints of our project is that the building itself is known for having electrical issues, and the power may trip. And during a big event like this, obviously you don't want your power to go out. So definitely need to ensure that we have backup generators and that we're being really responsible with our power use. The internal stakeholders for my event is obviously the Humane Society itself. And then another big internal stakeholder is actually our caterers. They are definitely using this as a big marketing opportunity for their businesses. They are a local business within Longmont. And then our animals, if we don't raise the funds that we need, then these animals may be displaced. External stakeholders, guests, our volunteers, our other vendors, residents, neighboring animal shelters. And I put that one in there because if these animals at the Humane Society don't have a place to be, then neighboring animal shelters will obviously have to take them in. And then, I put residents in there twice, but residents is one of them too. For my work breakdown structure, I broke everything into food and beverage. That's important because it's a pretty big focus of the event. Invitations are important because getting the guests to the event is imperative to raise the funds that we need. The venue, having a venue to host where we can fit 450 people, vendors, volunteers, and entertainment, staff to keep the event moving, and our auction, which will add additional funds to the event. And then just to make my Gantt chart a little bit easier to break down, I did add my critical path and milestones. So we want to book a caterer, begin ticket sales, book our venue, market our event, and host our auction. And then real quick, I see a question from Ruth. I do believe that the Humane Society was able to get donations, although the event was canceled. They obviously weren't able to get ticket sales, but I do think that donors and sponsors are continuing to support the Humane Society. And then a quick look at my Gantt chart. And then our vendor selection. So our caterers are local Longmont restaurants. It's a company of 3 restaurants. So the Roost, Hefes, and Smoke and Bowls will be the featured caterers for Homeward Bound. One thing I'd like to mention is Longmont is a very local community focused city. So every vendor is a local business within Longmont. Envision Production Group will be our AV vendor. They'll be able to provide, our speakers, our microphones, our projections, really everything we need to host our band and our silent and live auction. The City of Longmont Boulder County Fairground Building is going to host our event. And then Invitations by Violet Press are going to handle all of our print marketing and print invitations. And then Bonnie and the Clydes, a local band in Longmont, will be providing the live entertainment throughout the event. And then our budget plan, again, our budget, our goal was to keep the event under $10,000. A little bit of a challenge with this event is we do have a high ticket price. So we want to ensure that our guests are really getting value for that ticket price, yet we're still able to raise the funds that we need. And a way that we were doing that was to get as many donations as we possibly could. So food was donated, beverages were donated. We had volunteer staff, volunteer security, AV was donated. And then our photographer, videographer, and our volunteer training was all donated. So really our costs came into ensuring we had compostable serveware for our food, our venue rental fee, renting tables and chairs and all this stuff like that. And then my risk management plan, as we know, Colorado weather can be pretty unpredictable, and getting 450 people, to one location can be tricky if the weather is bad. So we would just have to accept that severe weather were to occur and that our event may be delayed and we'd have to get back on schedule pretty quickly. And then pandemic continuing, I think, is a really major risk factor for all events. We really don't know what it's going to look like, and if March of next year we're going to be able to host that many people in one spot. So we really need to pay attention to those mandates and see if we need to make a plan reevaluation to ensure that we're able to host the event as we have decided we need to meet our goals. And then alcohol consumption, it is going to be an open bar event. So we want to make sure our guests are able to enjoy themselves responsibly, and ensure that our volunteers who are serving alcohol, are licensed to be able to do that, are insured to be able to do that, and that they are able to help us keep things responsible and still fun. And in my progress report, just a couple issues that I anticipate going over is decor goes a little bit over our budget, and having to rein that in and maybe reevaluate not using as expensive flowers and incorporating less expensive but still really beautiful greenery. Another one is the client requests specialty cocktails that were not a part of the original agreement with a new vendor, that having to find a new vendor that can meet the needs of the requests of the Humane Society, has the products that they're looking for, is willing to donate their time and their product, and is licensed and insured to serve alcohol off premise. And then the last one, the band that we booked, this built-in venue stage is too small for the band, which was an easy fix. We just put them somewhere else in the venue that still is a central location that the guests are able to enjoy music. Our evaluation plan, really, really simple. Were we able to raise the funds that we needed through donors and sponsors? Were we able to sell out of our tickets? And what was our final expense cost? And then to wrap things off, my leadership style. I was a campaigner, so my strengths are curiosity, observance, energetic, enthusiastic, popular, and friendly. And my weaknesses, poor practical skills, difficulty to focus, overthinker, stresses easily, emotional, and independent to a fault, which I think upon looking at this, you might think that these characteristics don't make a great leader, but people like me are actually really tenacious in their goals. They find themselves to be really organized because they recognize that their weaknesses, you kind of have to balance them. They're able to really motivate a team by being personable with those people, and that they're really good with dealing with unexpected challenges with positivity. So yeah, that concludes my presentation.